Okay, damping off. Who's had damping off? Common. Plants actually have an immune system. Not like ours, but they have an immune system. In fact, I wish humans had an immune system like plants do. If a maple tree out here gets diseased, the maple tree behind this building, that immune system of that maple actually increases. Wouldn't that be awesome if your cousin got sick, your immune system got boosted? That'd be awesome. And we don't really know how that works yet, but we do know it requires photosynthesis. So in this stage, it's just the cotyledons there, and the phytoalexins aren't being produced yet, and so these damping off organisms are able to kill your plants. So we've talked about the aspen leaf spot, verticillium wilt, fascinating disease. This was a potato plant growing in Bolivia. I walked by and I saw this, and I'd never seen such perfect symptoms. But verticillium kills a plant in halves. If you notice this leaf right here, it's completely dead. Look at this leaf. Leaflets on this side are dead, and leaflets on this side are alive. The verticillium kills it in halves. Fascinating disease. And the tissue, if you've got a tomato plant and it grows and starts to produce fruit and then it dies, your chances are pretty good it's verticillium wilt. The way you check it is you cut into the stem. See this brown discoloration? You see that brown discoloration in the vascular system? You're pretty sure it's verticillium wilt. And this brown, and it attacks 324 different genera of plants, and it's brown on all of them except for maples. I've got a maple over here, and in maples it's green for some reason. But very fascinating disease.
That damping off, quite often my beans, when they come up, they look like that. Is that damping off?
Yep. And warm the soil up, or you can use a seed treatment, a Captan or something on your seed, treat the seed with it and plant it, and that'll protect it. Pardon?
It's caused by
cold soils and too wet of soils, yeah.
Or just wait to plant?
Wait till it's warmed up. Spread some clear plastic on the soil for a few days, warm the soil up, and that'll help bring them up.
Is that verticillium wilt? Does that happen with roses? Because I cut into my roses and they had that brown.
I don't believe it hits roses. I don't think it hit roses.
If it's right in the center of the roses, it's just a pit that's just dried up.
Well, what's kind of like the picture you
Roses have a lot of their own problems.
They do, but I don't think verticillium is one of those. Yeah. Heat stress, we're all familiar with that. The winds blow 25 miles an hour, it's 100 degrees outside. There's no way in the world the roots can get up enough moisture to keep the leaves going so the edges dry up and so forth. Fire blight, who deals with fire blight here? It's a very common disease down here, I know. We used to do research down in Utah Valley. A very typical shepherd's crook like that, very typical. Here it is again. That's the bacterium itself, so is that a sign or a symptom? Sign is the bacterium itself, that oozing out.
Does that get on tomatoes?
No. It attacks anything in the rose family. Cotoneaster, pyracantha, crab apples, pears.
50 years ago it was only in pears, and now it's in apples.
Yeah, well,
Is that a mutation, do you think?
probably not. Although this this bacterium has mutated. 10 years ago, you could take streptomycin sulfate, the same thing we took for sore throats. Control it easy. Now, 50% of the isolates are resistant to the streptomycin sulfate. So,
How does this one spread? Through insects?
rain splashes, insects, are two of the main ways.
Honey bees.
So proximity
Bees,
is
yeah.
an issue.
Pardon?
Proximity is an issue.
Uh-huh. Yep. So is that fire blight? Well, it sure looks like it, doesn't it? That typical shepherd's crook, that black burning. But boy, I don't know. Look at those leaves. Is that in the rose family? Yeah, that looks more like a cottonwood, doesn't it? Yeah, that's in the cottonwood family. So this is actually a fungus. So just because it has the same symptoms, you got to make sure it's in the. If it's fire blight, you got to make sure it's in the rose family. This is a fungal disease. So sometimes they can play tricks on you. These symptoms. Raspberry viruses, and like I said, they get 30 different viruses. There's some viruses we still don't know how they're transmitted in raspberries. This one, have this one around here. It's tomato spotted wilt. This is transmitted by a thrips, and the thrips gets the virus, and it's carried circulatively. Once the thrips has it for life. I think it's a cool looking disease, actually. It's pretty, but a lot of people don't share my opinion. Yep, they're still edible. I've never tasted one. I don't know if it affects the flavor or not, but they're edible. You don't want to can them, though. You can dry things like that, but I'd be leery about canning anything diseased because that can affect the pH, and your USDA recipes are geared toward pHs and so forth, and that could alter it. So drying it and everything's fine, but when you process in a canner, stick to the healthy stuff. This is a spruce needle. You can actually see these with the naked eye. They look like grains of pepper, but those are actual fungal structures. They're called pycnidia, and they're full of little spores. This particular disease, it takes 48 hours of free moisture for it to cause disease. So here's one, if you keep them dry, you don't have a problem. And it attacks the lower part of the spruce trees. I don't know if you have problems with the needles in the lower part of your spruce trees around here dying sometimes. This could be an issue. Everybody knows that one, right? Iron chlorosis. You guys live in Utah. They're very common up in our area too. Very thin green veins. Now, if these veins are really thick green, you might be looking at the manganese deficiency or a zinc deficiency, and both of those are triggered by our high pHs too. But the vast majority of the time you see this, it's iron chlorosis. You can actually take chelated iron and dip it in the chelated iron or use a Q-tip. And then write little notes on those things, and it greens right up where you write on there. Write little love notes to your sweetheart or something. Here's aryaphyte mites. This is the one that had me scratching my head. They brought this in, and it looks like crown gall. Exactly like crown gall. I thought, oh man, it's mutated. Now we've got it in the leaves. I dug around. Finally, we dug into it and found aryaphyte mites, which is an arthropod. I don't know, do you have many problems with aryaphyte mites around here? Well, we've sure seen they're starting to.
If you have them, that means we'll have them.
That's true. But yeah, it sure looks like crown gall. I'll show you the samples here. Scab on potatoes, very common. Yukon gold, very susceptible to scab. But this is caused by Streptomyces scabies, streptomycin sulfate. We get antibiotics from these organisms. So eat a lot of potatoes, you get. No, that's not true. But very common, very hard to control because these scab organisms like our basic soils and pretty much go to resistant varieties to control it. Nematodes we talked about, the roundworms, they attack the roots and just reduce root growth. Herbicide damage. I can go to any yard in Idaho Falls in August and find herbicide damage. The law in Idaho says you cannot spray if the wind is blowing above 10 miles an hour. But the average homeowner has no clue that that's the law. But even the commercial companies don't bend that quite a bit. But 2,4-D is very, very common up there. 2,4-D actually volatilizes. It gets 85 degrees or warmer, and it'll actually volatilize. There's an ester formulation which was notorious. In fact, there's a farmer that sprayed his grain field in California with an ester formulation, warmed up that day, volatilized, turned into a gas, and it moved 40 miles. Weather conditions changed, settled on a grape vineyard, and killed all the grapes. So yeah, it's amazing what the ester formulation. This one, more and more of a problem. You've probably seen this here. This is a chemical, an herbicide that actually goes through the digestive system of the cows, ends up in the manure. You compost the manure, you put the compost manure on your garden, and you still get the damage from the herbicide.
What herbicide is that?
Everest is one of them, and I can't remember the other names. They've left me. Do you remember any of the names of those that do that? I got to go back and look them up again. But yeah, you got to be careful of your manure source. No, it's not. Roundup is like candy to the microorganisms. They eat it immediately.
Does it volatilize only if you're applying it when it's
85 degrees?
Or more?
No.
Or like you apply it
if it's there,
and it
yeah,
gets...
exactly. If it's still there, it can volatilize. Yeah.
Okay.
This one, can you see these dead branches going around like this, sort of in a barber pole shape? Mm-hmm. That means one root has been killed. The roots in a spruce feed the tree in a spiral shape, and so if you come across a spruce where branches are just dying in a spiral shape going up, it means one of the roots has gotten into some herbicide, and it's killed it, and it's killing the tree in that spiral shape. And I've seen 4 or 5 trees in Idaho Falls that are like that. So, powdery mildew, it attacks everything. Come 1st of September, I start getting calls. I got this white powder on my plants. I said, well, yeah, you can spray for it, but up in Idaho Falls, in 2 weeks, it's going to freeze, so Mother Nature's going to take care of the problem. So I say, don't waste your money. Down here, I don't know. You know, you have a lot longer growing season, so it might pay to treat powdery mildew. I don't know the situation. I always recommend it for apples. You want to control it on the apples because, you know, it ends up like this, and it burns the terminals, it fires the terminals and stuff. So in apples, yeah, you want to spray for it, but in all the others, in Idaho, I don't need to worry about it because Mother Nature's going to take care of it for you. The powdery mildews, they do have the same life cycle as the aspen leaf spot. So if you've got a specimen plant that nobody else has and somehow it ends up with a little powdery mildew, remove the leaves, you're removing the inoculum, and you can control the disease that way if, you know, your neighbors don't have that same plant. So these are very host specific, these powdery mildews.
When I think it was picloram.
Picloram? Okay, thank you.
Seems like on squash and pumpkins and that, powdery mildew happens every single year.
Every single year, yep.
But sometimes it does happen. Does it just naturally happen when the plant starts to die down, or is it a
pretty much
timing issue, or is it a?
It's a disease of age. You see it more when the plant's more mature. Yeah. And I've seen late summer, early fall. I've seen field bindweed, morning glory. It just snookered by it. But later in the season, when it's older, yeah.
What would cause it to come on earlier than normal?
Plant health, weather conditions are the two that trigger it earlier. Did I see another hand?
With that powdery mildew, do you need to get rid of those plants and burn them, or can you just till them in?
It depends on what hat you want me to wear. If I'm wearing my gardener hat, don't worry about it. Till it in because the spores are everywhere. It's not going to be an issue. If I wear my extension agent hat, now it's diseased. You need to get rid of the tissue, but the spores are everywhere. So yeah, you're supposed to get rid of it because you're destroying the inoculum and you're reducing inoculum. But the inoculum is so overwhelming everywhere else that you're not putting a dent in it in the real world sense. So my extension agent answer is get rid of it, but my gardening hat says it's everywhere anyway. That's not true with all diseases. That's the problem when I go with my gardener hat. You got to know what disease you're talking about, and that's why as extension agents we recommend if it's diseased, get rid of it because you're not sure what disease it is and how it's going to go into the environment.
When you say weather conditions, you mean being humid?
A little more humid. Mm-hmm.
Powdery mildew actually kind of likes a little dry.
They do. Powdery mildew is one of those that actually grow with 75% humidity. It likes it a little drier than most of your fungi. It does. And you'll see it in late summer when it's warmer. Thanks for bringing that up.
When it's really hot and dry, that's when it's
Yeah, thanks for bringing that up. Yeah. This is one of the few that like it a little drier. Did I see another hand over here? There's more powdery mildew. You see these little black dots? That's the structure. That's the fungal structure. If you see those black dots, you know you're dealing with a fungus. Same thing like on that spruce leaf.
Can you prevent it? Is there a
Oh yeah, sprays, you bet. You can spray and control it very well. You bet.
So when do you spray?
Generally when you see the symptoms, you know, it depends. Are you talking powdery mildew? Generally when you first start seeing the symptoms, but by then it's probably a little late for powdery mildew. Boy, that's a tough one to answer.
preventative, and if you know you're going to get it on your pumpkins, then just spray your pumpkins.
Yeah, if you don't want it. In our country, it shows up 2 weeks before the frost, so why waste your money on it? But here, you've got a lot longer growing season, so yeah, you probably want to control it. You know, in years past, you notice when it gets a little cooler, and there's probably models on the computer where they, you know, X amount of days, X amount of moisture, humidity, and you're supposed to spray to control it. But yeah, just do it by ear, and like he said, that's a tough one to answer.
I was just making a comment. At my last house, I would get powdery mildew every spring on my roses and my pincushion flowers. And so I just started spraying first thing in the spring because they had overhead watering and I couldn't do anything about that. And it pretty much never showed up if I would just spray it at the beginning. And then if I saw little tiny spots come on, I'd spray it again and it would basically go away.
A prophylactic approach is a good way to do it. Keep in mind that disease triangle. And yeah, prophylactic approach. Oh, come on, it's job security. Those and aspen trees are job security for us guys. Anybody seen corn smut? Anybody ever eaten corn smut?
Oh, there's some kind of an exotic food. Isn't
Oh
there?
yeah, if you go to the East Coast and the higher end restaurants, and you'll see something on the menu called smoky maize. Why they don't call it corn smut, I don't know, because that's what you're eating. Okay, that's what you're eating right there. You eat it at that stage. Don't eat it at this stage. But you can go to Mexico. They can it. It's on cans. There was a guy last night I was talking to. He says, "Yeah, down at the Mexican place, the store, the tienda there, they sell it down there in cans." Oh yeah, they raise it. You bet. It's a delicacy. These spores survive in the soil for 3 years. So if it gets to that stage, the spores go in the soil, and then it'll infect your crop. And they have fields that they purposely keep it infected with the fungus.
You said you could eat it at this stage over here, the white counter?
Right here, yeah, right here. Don't let it get to this stage. That's got to be nasty. But yeah, right here at the white. It's just sort of like a puffball mushroom, you know. You eat the small puffball mushroom, but when they get big and inky inside, you don't want to eat them. So.
That stage on the right, it's kind of sweet and sugary. That's what the corn is.
Yeah. They say a slight hint of smoke and mushroomy flavor with a hint of sweet cornness. They say it's delicious. So. You get on the internet. There's tons of recipes for it. Tons of recipes. You can eat it raw. I have stories we can't go into, but 3 years. If you get it in your garden, rotate out for 3 years. Cattle love this stuff, and it will go through the digestive tract and come out in the manure. So if it shows up in your garden and you brought in some fresh manure, or even composted manure, that's probably where it came from. Hollyhock rust. Here's another rust. It's a dioecious rust that needs 2 hosts. The mallow, cheeseweed, and hollyhock. So if you don't want your mallow getting sick, get rid of your hollyhocks. Okay? If you don't want your hollyhocks getting sick, get rid of your mallow. But of course that can't be done. There's too much of both. But that's how you control these. You get rid of one of the hosts and the disease goes away. Blossom end rot, who's had that one?
Calcium deficiency.
Yeah, you've talked about it already. This frustrates me every time I see it. What do we have too much in our soils? Calcium. This is a lack of calcium. So you can actually spray calcium on the leaves and control this. But it's the wet, dry cycle, especially during the season as the tomatoes are initiated. If there's not enough calcium, you'll get this blossom end rot. Keep your soil moisture even, and you'll never have that problem, okay? Or you can spray the calcium on the leaves.
Are some tomatoes more susceptible?
Yes, they are. But unfortunately, I don't have a list of the susceptible, non-susceptible ones, but that is true, yeah.
I planted red tomatoes and yellow tomatoes all in the same patch. And the red tomatoes were fine, and the yellow tomatoes all had blossom end rot.
Yeah, and then there are varietal differences. Yes, there are.
Is blossom end rot a pathogen then?
It's a nutrient deficiency.
A pathogen will move in later because the cell walls aren't formed properly. You kind of have this gooey mass in there, but initially there's no.
Yeah, it's a nutrient deficiency. Yeah, and yeah,
So
pathogens can move
You
in.
add calcium?
To the leaves, you can spray calcium on the leaves. Do not add calcium to your soil, please. Just keep the moisture level. Keep it even. And now the problem will go away.
Epsom salt can help with that.
Magnesium sulfate, I don't think it'll help with that.
What does that help with?
That'll help magnesium.
It's magnesium, and if your soil needs magnesium, yeah, that'll help fertilize. Question here?
Yeah, what is the deficiency that's causing?
The causes this? Calcium deficiency. Because the wet, dry triggers the plant somehow, it won't take the calcium up.
So it locks it.
Yeah, it just triggers the plant not to take calcium for some reason.
Some apples will get that too.
Yeah, and squash will get it. Bitter pit, well, yeah. Here's these little black spots again, so you know it's a fungus. This one, the needles, the spores are needle-shaped, so it's not carried by the wind. has the same disease cycle as the aspen leaf spot. But if your neighbor has it and you have it, you can remove your leaves and you won't get much of it because the needles or the spores are needle shaped and they don't get carried by the wind much. So here's one where you can remove the diseased tissue and it'll help. Anthracnose, this is the disease triangle again. The pathogen and the host live together. The pathogen lives saprophytically on the host. When the environment's right, if you get this warm spring, if this continues, then we get a 2-week period of rain mid-May, you're going to see anthracnose really bad. But it needs that wet. But if you don't have the wet, you don't have the environment. And you don't have this disease much. I've seen it completely defoliate trees. Cankers, a lot of cankers out there. It used to be you could, back in the old days where we had those phone books, remember those phone books? You look up under tree services, you'd find tree surgeons. You actually hire tree surgeons to come and cut these cankers out. Their success rate was 10%, so don't count on it. Slime flux, you've probably seen this. It's a bacterial disease, doesn't affect the health of the tree much, but it's scary. It bubbles and foams. 60 pounds of pressure is created by the bacteria inside, and it pushes the gases out, the carbon dioxide, and carries sap and so forth, and it stings, sort of fermenty kind of thing. Stains the trees. And crown gall, this is actually a plant cancer. Don't have time to talk about it, but the only way to control it, if you can control a bacterial disease, it's Agrobacterium tumefaciens, which is a bacterium, and you can use the bactericide and control that. But once this gets in the plant, it actually hooks into the plant genetics itself, and it becomes a cancer, and the only way you can control it is cut it out. Had a lady call me, and she says, my juniper tree's blooming. Blooming? You better bring that in. So this is what she brought into me. So, oh, yesterday it was twice this size. It was bigger than a softball. It's just beautiful. I want to sell it to the nurseries. All excited about it. And I says, I hated to break her heart, but it's cedar apple rust. But this is another rust that's dioecious rust. On the apples, on the rosaceous family, rose family, that's the way it looks, the disease. And that's the way it looks in juniper. Same fungus. Same fungus. Look at the difference. That's the acial stage. And this is the teleal stage. But that's an awesome blossom, you know. But anyway, they need both hosts. You get rid of one of them, you won't have the disease. Shot hole blight, that's the same situation as the anthracnose. It lives in the stems. This one you have to spray in the fall to control it. You just have to guess if you're going to have the right environment to have it in the spring. Tough call if you're, raising these things for selling in the market. And I've had, there's a year I have an apricot tree in my backyard. And there was a year every one of them looked at least that bad, if not worse. Conditions were right for it and really got nailed. It's called shot hole blight because it leaves little perfectly round circles in the leaves. Peach leaf curl you have here. Infects early in the season, overwinters on the tree, you can spray for it. And there's some resistant cultivars available for it. Early blight, not much of a problem in gardens because it fertilizes it with sufficient nitrogen. That isn't a problem, but you see it once in a while. Frost damage, we always have frost damage. In the wintertime, especially in our country, it warms up 30, 35 degrees, the sap starts flowing, and it goes 15 below zero sometimes, and what happens when water freezes? It expands, get these cracks going up and down the tree. This one compartmentalized it and did all right. They're forecasting 15-degree temperature that night. And the tree back at the extension office, full blossom. So I took a picture of that and cut into one of the flowers. That's going to be the apple, and looked great. Well, sure enough, it hit 15 degrees. That's what they looked like the next day. So, if you have we have frost, and everybody calls it extension agent. Did it kill the fruit? He doesn't know, guys. Was it protected? Was it in a drained area? Was it in a frost pocket? You don't know if it's just a frost. So go out and cut about 10, 11 o'clock the next morning, cut into it, and if it looks like that, it didn't make it, okay? Looks like that, it made it. Hail damage, that's common sense. You can see that kind of damage. Mushrooms in the turf. A mushroom is a flower of a fungus. If you have a petunia, what comes first, the flower or the flowers or the leaves on a petunia? The leaves come first, and then the flower. Same thing with the mushroom. You have to have the fungus first, and then it produces that flower or the mushroom. If you pick the flower off of a petunia plant, are you going to kill it? If you pick a mushroom, are you going to kill the fungus? You're just picking the flower off. Okay. You probably will talk fairy rings and the turf. We won't go into that. What they're doing, they're feeding on dead organic matter. The only way to get rid of them is to rip up and find out what they're feeding on and get rid of that. Generally, it's dead roots in your yard. That's generally what's causing the mushrooms to grow. Connie cushion skull. This looks like a fungus, or somebody had a s'more party in the backyard, one of the two. But it looks like a fungus, but it's actually caused by insects. Turf problems? Question.
Is it necessarily bad to have fungus growing in your lawn?
Not necessarily. They're doing their job. That's what they're breaking down organic matter and returning it back to.
My husband was freaking out about it. I'm like, hey, my kid's happy playing with it.
Yeah, just don't eat the mushrooms. Turf problems, the way we water, you'll talk about that, but to prevent turf problems, fungal turf problems, water infrequently and deeply and water during the dew period. Pretty straightforward, and you'll talk much more about that. This is the last picture. I had a guy call me, and he said, I just got through mowing my lawn, and the bottom of my lawnmower is all red, and my shoes are all red. And I says, oh, did you run over your dog? He says, no, I didn't hit the dog. He said, well, you better bring some in. So he brought it in, and this was what he had. It's rust in turf grass. And he said, not only do I have the problem here, but I take care of a property 2 blocks away, and I have the rest there, too. So what do you think? What happened? The lawnmower equipment. And boy, I thought, that's an easy one to solve. But then he continued. He says, not only, I've got this, but I'm doing something different. I'm using drip irrigation underneath the turf. I bought this from the turf farm, and I'm rolling it out, and I'm putting sub-irrigation underneath it. So, okay, so I'm thinking disease triangle. Fungi like it. Of course, rust like it a little drier, too. But the environment, there's no water at all on top if it's not watering. So, in the environment's not real conducive to it. And I got to thinking. And so finally it dawned on me, yeah, I was wrong. I guess the lawnmower moved it. Well, he brought it in from the turf farm. That's where he brought it in from. So, first impressions aren't always right. So this is called the poor man's disease. Throw a little nitrogen on here, get the plant a little healthier, and it goes away completely. So this is one of those diseases that make the plant healthy and you don't have a problem with it, okay? Okay, that's the end.